In the first few weeks of the new year, Zomba, along with other notable competitors, all took a trip to Japan. For the first time since Cafeteria 10, we were going to see overseas competitors go to Japan for once instead of Japanese competitors being forced to come over here to the US. For a long time now, people have been talking up Japan, including myself. They say that they're the strongest region, that their top players are the highest ranked, the most skilled, and saying that their average player is better than the average player compared to everywhere else. And now, we have eyes and ears on the ground to confirm or deny these claims. And so, all of this begs the question, how'd he do? Welcome to the first episode of a 3-part mini-series. You see, while many competitors went to Japan in January, there are 3 who were the most notable, in both placements and out-of-trip rankings / notoriety. Zomba, Apollo Kage, and Gluttony. This mini-series will be taking a look at every single one of these players and asking the question, how'd he do? Now, these 3 all have a varying degree of how long they stayed in Japan. Zomba, for instance, has actually been back from Japan for so long that he's had the time to travel to Europe and win Valhalla 4, which is what I made yesterday's video about. Apollo Kage just got back from Japan, arriving back in the States a week ago, upon which he immediately started attending locals again because he's just a grinder like that. And as for Gluttony? Well, Gluttony is still in Japan as far as I know, so I couldn't even tell you about his complete Japanese exploits yet. And so no, these episodes will not come out in succession. Long story short, I'll release them when I release them. You gotta understand, daily uploads mixed with college classes and another part-time job has made my schedule very, let's call it crammed. Anyways, today, even though it's a few weeks late, we'll be going over Zomba's trip to Japan at length, going over nearly every set he played and answering the question, how'd he do? Zomba's trip started where all 3 of our players began their trips, Umebura SP10. Considered to be the main event of all of these vacations, this was the tournament that people were coming for. Yes, Kowloon 9 was the weekend right after, but this tournament, for all intents and purposes, was the big cheese, the meat and potatoes of this trip. After all, it's the only tournament of 2024 so far to be classified as a premier, the only tier of tournament above Super Major. It also happens to be the tournament that we have the most VODs for, but, you know, since we're doing this chronologically, it's first up. Zomba came into Umebura SP10 as the 5th seed, and nearly every single VOD of his was put on stream. I'm not kidding, of the 11 sets played, only 3 of them were off stream. This doesn't include Zomba's first set though, which was versus a Wolf player named Dasuta Do. And Zomba would end up winning this set in just under 8 minutes total, 2-0ing Dasuta Do dominantly to move on in bracket. And these next 3 sets were the 3 that were unstreamed. In pools, Zomba defeated Fern 2-0, before moving on into round 2 and defeating Setsu 3-0, and lastly defeating Naocha in another 3-0. A funny coincidence given that Naocha would actually fight Zomba again at Cafeteria Cup not even a week later. But getting back to this tourney, Zomba's next set would be against Matara, the best Meta Knight in the world. And although it wouldn't be flawless, Zomba would eventually win the set in a 3-1 victory, moving on in bracket. But if that set had been hard for Zomba, the next one would be another level. Zomba had to go up versus Toriguri, the best banjo in the world who I made a documentary about, which you should go watch. And you may already know how this set goes. After all, Turned Down for Walt made a video where he talked about it. In one of the bigger upsets of the tournament, Toriguri defeated Zomba 3-1, making a big comeback in Game 4 to send the 5th seed down into losers incredibly early. And let me tell you, the losers bracket of this tournament was filled with killers. Zomba's first set, for example, was versus Eligo. Eligo is in competition with Suinoko for the best young link in Japan, and Zomba has struggled hard in that matchup previously. But thankfully, Zomba was able to conquer the matchup that he had so hated previously, defeating Eligo 3-1. Now that he had fought a high-tier hero, if there can even be such a thing, Zomba had to fight a low-tier hero. That's because his next opponent was Wine, the best Zelda player in the world. And even though this low-tier hero was able to take a game off of Zomba, it wouldn't matter in the end, as Zomba won the set in yet another 3-1, moving on in bracket. And here, ironically enough, Zomba would have to fight another American. Cosmos was also at this tournament, and in the unpredictable, volatile way that we've come to expect from Cosmos, he was going on an insane run of his own. But only one of them could advance in bracket, and even though it went to a decisive Game 5, that Game 5 itself was dominant for Zomba, defeating Cosmos 3-2 and moving on. Zomba was now 1 round away from the losers top 8 qualifier, already on the losers run of a lifetime, filled with lots of big threats. But Zomba's next set was against his highest profile opponent yet. Ashimo had dropped into losers bracket surprisingly early, and now had to fight Zomba for 13th place. At any other tournament, this could have been grand finals, but this tournament was a crazy one, and only one player would walk away from this with their bracket run intact. Luckily for our hero though, that player would be himself. Zomba defeated Ashimo 3-1, moving into the loser side top 8 qualifier. Guaranteed 9th, Zomba now had to go up versus Doramigi, the best Minmin in the world. And when I was watching this tournament live, I fell into despair. Full disclosure, I was rooting for Doramigi at the time. And Rob Minmin is not only my least favorite matchup in the entire game, but one that I consider to be terrible for Minmin. In my mind, there was no way that Doramigi defeats Zomba here. But then... It's a cover! Oh! Yeah, Doramigi kinda raw with it. But unfortunately for our hero, that 3-0 loss to Doramigi meant that he was eliminated at 9th place as the 5th seed, barely missing out on top 8. This could not have felt good. But luckily for Zomba, an opportunity would arise that would allow him to get revenge and make a great run of his own. You see, an impromptu invitational named Cafeteria Cup was hosted, and Zomba was invited to attend. This may be the first time ever that Zomba has actually made it into an invitational, as his luck at qualifying for those things is infamously bad. I mean, seriously, there's a whole curse surrounding it. But either way, Zomba entered Cafeteria Cup as the 2nd seed. But here's where I've got bad news. Pretty much every pool set Zomba had was actually streamed, except for the fact that they were done on the side stream. And when I went back to get those VODs from the side stream to use in this video, yeah, they were locked behind a paywall. And since they were never uploaded onto YouTube, I can't access them. For fear of pissing off the French dimension, I'm not going to say what I'd like to say right now, and instead simply apologize for not having the VODs. These pool sets that were missing was Zomba's 3-0 victory against Naocha for the 2nd time in this video, as well as a Game 5 set against Atelier, a set that would prove foreshadowing for later on in the tournament. Additionally, Zomba would beat Ouch 3-0 in pools, the only pool set Zomba had that was put on the main stream. After getting through pools with games dropped only to Atelier, Zomba moved on into main bracket winners quarterfinals, where he defeated Senra 3-0, which, again, we don't have, because it was on the side stream and it was locked behind a paywall. Okay, I'll stop. Now in top 8 through winner's side, Zomba went on to defeat Neo, who had gone on a pretty crazy run of his own, in a 3-1 set victory. This meant that Zomba moved on into winners finals versus Atelier, who had just defeated Gluttony among others to make it here. With the first seed of the tournament out of the way early, Zomba's path became slightly easier. While Atelier put up a great fight, Zomba still won the set 3-1, moving into grand finals from winner's side. And when Atelier defeated Neo and moved into grands from loser's side, Zomba would make the set count even less close. For their first set, they went game 5. In winner's finals, it was a 3-1. And now here in grands, Zomba 3-0'd Atelier to win Cafeteria Cup as the 2nd seed. With this victory, and with his recent victories at Brookland 100 and Valhalla 4, Zomba has officially won important tournaments, C tiers or above, in NA, EU, and Japan. Quite an impressive resume to start the year. But there was one more tournament that Zomba attended in Japan before he left. Kowloon 9 with Sumabato was famous for many things, like Rarukun getting 2nd place, 2 Minmin players getting into top 8, and Gluttony being eliminated at 17th. But for Zomba, this tournament saw his sets all get streamed front row and... Wait, hold on. What do you mean not all of his sets were streamed? Okay, well, how many of Zomba's sets were put on stream? What do you mean 2? Okay, so if you thought Cafeteria Cup didn't have a lot of VODs, I have terrible news for you. Zomba was put on stream a grand total of 2 times throughout this tournament. I know, it seems crazy, but when I checked VGBC, only 1 VOD. When I checked the Japanese mainstream, Zomba wasn't there once. I checked the Japanese side stream, Zomba wasn't there at all. I checked the French stream and no Zomba. Only the French side stream had the 2nd VOD that I almost didn't find. I actually got a headache with how hard I looked for anything from Zomba at this tournament. But yeah, just 2 VODs. Anyways, let's get into it. Zomba entered Kowloon 9 with Sumabato as the 4th seed, starting off the weekend by sweeping pools flawlessly, defeating Yasai Kageyage, Yaki, and Uraromote, all in 3-0 victories. Moving on into top 128, Zomba had 2 back-to-back Game 5s. First against Gachipi, who Zomba has lost to before on previous Japan trips, as well as Base Mage, who was also kicking around Japan at this time. This allowed Zomba to move into top 32, where he defeated Steve Main 33 Parenbox in a 3-0 set, moving all the way into winners quarterfinals. Here is where Zomba had one of his only 2 streamed sets, this time versus Yara. And unfortunately, even though Zomba was finally put on stream, he'd end up losing that set 3-1 to the Japanese Samus, dropping into the loser's side top 8 qualifier where he'd have to go up against Hurt, who had been fighting through losers after falling to Omawatsu. And Zomba does have a bit of a snake problem, which would not stop here, with Zomba unfortunately losing to Hurt 3-1, being eliminated at 9th place as the 4th seed. So where does that leave us? Kowloon 9 proved to be Zomba's last tournament in Japan during this period, with Zomba returning home afterward. Of the big 3 players that we're covering in this mini-series, Zomba's run is the shortest and perhaps the most volatile. Placing 9th at both majors, Zomba barely missed out on top 8 both times. But he also won Cafeteria Cup, not only participating in an invitational, but winning it. And that win proved to be Zomba's biggest legacy from his time in Japan, as the young prodigy travels the world, collecting wins all over, in what may be the beginning of a journey for Zomba, a journey to become the best in the world. That's going to be it for today's video. Before I go, shout out to my patrons Seth Laster, Fosco333, Logan S, Persipom, Wawa, Mr. Sinister, and my two patrons Iltis and Diamond Blaze. Additionally, shout out my YouTube members Loco Soko, Dijo Jr., Defective, Diarrhea, Fan of, Boston R, Iltis, Gone SSB, Kirby Fan, and my two members Mike G, Wu-Tang Forever, and Stormtrooper. Lastly, extra special thanks to my tier 3 patrons Ocean Man, who says Rooster Mice is sorry for playing Min, and Mistybot, who says, in my opinion, Me Gunner is high tier. If you want to support me using any of these methods, links are in the description below. Don't miss tomorrow's upload, but until then, I've been Mr. Mice, and thank you all so very much for watching.
Shadows will mass destruction.